In 2010, the iPad started off as a simple product. One model featuring a large touchscreen that made consuming content more enjoyable than on a computer or iPhone. But today, it's not so simple. Apple has split the iPad into four different models, with various screen sizes, features, designs, and accessory compatibility. So let's find out why this happened by tracking the iPad's lineup growth over the past 15 years. In the early days, there was just iPad. It started at $499 and could be customized to include more storage or even cellular connectivity. This was the case for almost 3 years, with the original model, iPad 2 in 2011, and the third gen iPad in March 2012. But during this time, a new tablet market emerged that threatened iPad. It was made up of 7-inch models that were lighter, more compact, and more comfortable to use one-handed. Steve Jobs initially dismissed this market, claiming that a big 9.7-inch display was critical for a good browsing experience. He actually ranted about this during an earnings call in late 2010, saying 7-inch tablets will be dead on arrival, and that 7-inch tablets should come with sandpaper so that users can file down their fingers so that they can use them. Now, I'm not sure what that meant since the iPhone had a much smaller screen and accommodated fingers just fine. But eventually, articles were written in support of smaller tablets, like this one by Kevin Toffel, titled Why I Just Dumped the iPad. Hint, size matters. In it, Toffel says the Galaxy Tab is half the size of an iPad, making it far easier to tote around and use while standing or walking. Apple's Senior Vice President of Services, Eddie Q, actually emailed this article to Jobs, saying, having used a Samsung Galaxy, I tend to agree with many of the comments in the article. I believe there will be a 7-inch market, and we should do one. That was in January 2011, and while Jobs appeared to be warming up to the idea of a smaller iPad, his death in October 2011 removed all obstacles to creating it. So in November the following year, Apple introduced iPad mini, which had a smaller 7.9-inch screen, a new form factor with smaller borders on either side, and a more affordable $329 price. Whereas the standard third-gen iPad had a 9.7-inch screen and a $499 price. But those weren't the only models being sold. Apple continued to sell the year-old iPad 2 for a discounted $399. That meant customers had to decide if they wanted a big or small iPad and then decide between the older or newer model, making things a little more complicated than a couple years prior. But this gives you an idea of Apple's sales strategy. They wanted to offer iPads at different price points to do two things: maximize revenue and capture as many customers as possible. This played out even further in 2013, when the first iPad Air was introduced. It featured a thinner design with smaller borders, similar to iPad mini, but the naming scheme made things a little more complicated, because the standard iPad, which used to be the flagship model, was cheaper than the iPad Air, and the iPad mini now came in two models, one at $299 and another at $399, the same price as the larger 9.7-inch iPad, causing customers to wonder why a device with a smaller screen costs just as much as one with a bigger screen. But Apple knew most people just buy what they can afford, so selling a $299 iPad mini was appealing to customers on a budget, while a more expensive $399 model earned Apple more revenue than the previous $329 price. In 2014, things got even crazier. Apple came out with the new iPad Air 2 and iPad mini 3 while continuing to sell their older counterparts. So customers walking up to an iPad display at an Apple store saw three identical iPad minis being sold at three different prices. Then two identical iPad Airs also being sold at two different prices. And that's in addition to the Mini 3 being the same price as the larger Air. How long do you think it took for the average person to figure out the minute differences between all these models? But again, Apple didn't care, because it let them sell an iPad for a record-breaking low price of $249, which meant parents could buy them for their kids, and companies could buy them in bulk for employees, and Apple could capture segments of the tablet market never before possible. But they had a secret plan to capitalize on all these new customers, because in 2015, they stopped being so interested in small, low-cost iPads and introduced iPad Pro, with the biggest display yet at 12.9 inches and the highest price yet at $799, maximizing revenue further by giving customers with no budget an opportunity to spend more for an iPad than ever before. Apple also raised the Mini's entry price from $249 to $269, so already you can see where things are headed, which Apple made even clearer by 2017, when they consolidated iPad's lineup into just three models: the $399 Mini, $329 5th Gen iPad, and the iPad Pro, which came in two sizes for $649 and $799. Now, this did simplify things quite a bit, since Apple offered three distinct models that were clearly different from each other. But pricing wasn't as intuitive. A small iPad mini being $70 more than a large iPad didn't make sense at first glance. It's also worth noting that Apple shifted their focus from selling low-price models to higher-priced ones. In just 3 years, the cheapest iPad went from $249 to $329, while the most expensive jumped from $499 to $799. Apple had captured millions of customers at a low price point, and they were prepared to upsell those users when it came time to upgrade. In 2018, Apple raised the iPad Pro's price even higher, and while the upgrades that year were pretty impressive, many customers were surprised at the cost. The entry-level iPad Pro was $799, up from $649 a year before, while the larger model was $999, a $200 jump in a single year. The iPad Air was also reintroduced at the beginning of 2019, so customers had four models to choose from that ranged in price from $329 to $999. This was a fantastic situation for Apple, since it covered a wide range of price points that ensured they were getting as much money as possible from every customer. And they tried reaching into people's wallets just a little deeper in 2021 when price hikes were introduced to almost every iPad. The $329 model remained the same, but the Mini went from $399 to $499. The Air went from $499 to $599, and the 12.9-inch Pro went from $999 to $1,099. iPads were getting expensive, despite there still being four different models. Now, in 2022, Apple tried remedying the aggressive price hikes by introducing a slightly more premium, yet lower priced model with the 10th gen iPad. It was $449 and offered a more modern design compared to the cheapest model, but it added complexity for shoppers, since there were 5 different models to choose from, with various Apple Pencil and Magic Keyboard compatibility. Luckily, if you look at the iPad lineup today, Apple has mostly addressed this issue. All models are compatible with the USB-C Apple Pencil, and there are only 4 models, each with a distinct name and feature set. This is an improvement over previous years, but the price increases are still being felt, especially with the iPad mini, which is now what a full-size model used to cost, and iPad Pro, since both models increased in price again by $200 last year, going from $799 to $999, and $1,099 to $1,299. That means a 12.9-inch iPad now costs more than a 15-inch MacBook Air, and I'm not sure the average customer should ever spend that much for a device running iPadOS, since macOS is much more useful. So while shopping for an iPad can be confusing, the sales strategy is working well for Apple, since iPad revenue reached $7 billion last quarter, which was 8% more than 2023 and almost matched the Mac's $7.7 billion. So that is why Apple sells so many different iPads. This is Greg with Apple Explained. Thanks for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next video.